the minimum radius turn. This video covers the minimum radius turn from the number 6 opposing solo perspective. For this maneuver, number 5 has the center stage, so number 6 is just the supporting act. Well, your job for the MRT is basically just a fancy rejoin. Learning the timing and hitting your numbers is harder than you might think. Briefing. This maneuver starts after both solo pilots clear the showbox following the Fortis. Number 5 will be flying away from crowd to the left, and number 6 will be maintaining a heading that takes him behind the crowd. Upon hearing number 5's radio call that signals he is turning in to set up the MRT, number 6 will maneuver aggressively to be pointed at center point, roughly 30 degrees behind crowd left, at 1,200 feet AGL, and about 1 nautical mile further from center point than number 5, all the way in. Once number 5 begins his minimum radius turn, number 6 will monitor closure rates and aim to cross center line when number 5 pulls into the vertical. Number 6 will then perform a level turn to fly parallel to number 5's clearing angle, which will be between 10 and 15 degrees away from crowd to the right. Number 6 will maintain altitude and airspeed to end up slightly ahead of number 5 on a parallel vector. Both aircraft will then perform a sharp 90-degree clearing turn behind the crowd to set up the next maneuver. For the opposing solo, the MRT is all about timing, and there are a lot of factors you will have to juggle. Because an MRT takes number 5 to the edge of the Hornet's flight envelope, the radius and turn rate will vary with changes in atmospheric conditions. This means that the maneuver will change from show site to show site, and you will have to learn to roll with the punches. Let's get started. Walkthrough. All right, welcome back to the office. We are once again in the cockpit of our trusty FA-18C Hornet. We're talking through the MRT from the opposing solo perspective today. And because we're the opposing solo, that means that this maneuver is not about us. It is about number 5. He's over here. And that's because we have just cleared from the Fortis, and we are headed away from crowd behind the crowd, and he is headed away from crowd to the crowd left heading. So he's out here, and we're heading left. Now, something I want to talk about real quickly before we get into the rest of the maneuver is that I don't actually know what number 6 does behind the crowd while this maneuver is getting set up. I've been to 2 Blue Angels airshows in person since we started practicing this in DCS, and I've also watched hours and hours and hours of YouTube videos of Blue Angels airshows, but nobody films what number 6 does, and in both of the air shows I didn't have a good view behind the crowd to tell. So I'm making a lot of assumptions about what he's doing based on the angle that he comes in over the flight line when I was able to maintain sight of him, and a variety of other factors about where he needs to be and how long he needs to be out there. But a lot of this is just my solution to the geometry puzzle that is the MRT for the opposing solo. So without further ado, let's talk more about the actual thing itself. So what we're doing right now is we're flying behind the crowd, and we'll also be climbing away from the crowd. So we'll see if we start doing that. Yeah, there we go, nose up. And so we're going to be looking for about 2,000 feet AGL and about 400 knots away from crowd. And we're just going to head away from crowd, behind the crowd, and we're going to wait for number 5 to tell us that he's starting his maneuver. So what radio call are we waiting for while we're listening for number 5? Well, he will say his call sign is arcing 5 miles for the MRT, which means that he is at his turn-in point, headed away from crowd. He's going to begin his turn-in back towards center point to set up his maneuver. The turn is designed so that he will be at 5 miles from center point when he's at 90 degrees through the turn. And then he will give a radio call sign is at 5 miles turning in, or turning in 5 miles for the MRT. And it's that second call that we are going to want to use for our turn in towards center point. So when we hear that he's turning in at 5 miles, that's when we want to be turning in because we want to intercept him once he gets to center point. But we also can't leave the show box, the restricted airspace that the Blues Airshow happens in. So we need to do a little bit of maneuvering so we're staying within 5 miles of center point, but also we're not beating number 5 to center point because he's got a whole minimum radius turn to do before we need to actually intercept him. So you can see here that I am 3.4 miles, so I'm getting close. And so you'll notice in this particular replay, I'm going to turn to the crowd left heading, kind of follow number 5 out that direction before we get to 5 miles away from center point behind crowd, so I have a little extra room. And now I'm listening for that radio call, and it'll be Chariots turning in 5 miles for the MRT, and so I'm going to go turn back in towards center point. And as I'm turning back in towards center point, I'm pulling hard because I want to be losing airspeed, and I'm also probably going to want to put my speed brake out. So you can see speed brake down here is coming out. Roll out, heading towards center point. You can notice that I'm heading a little bit to the left, or rather to the right of center point, because I know I'm going to need a little extra time once Chariot gets in to actually do his whole MRT. And then I'm also looking for number 5 out of the corner of my eye here, or actually sometimes I'm just full head out of the cockpit, and I'm looking to see if I can see number 5. And I think I saw him a minute ago, so we can pick him up. He's in here. There he is. Boom. Number 5. So he's down there. He's probably at the 1.5 mile mark from center point right there. And what happens throughout his entire ingress is that at every mile he will call his speed and distance. So he will call 3 miles 350 because he's aiming to be at 350 knots all the way in from 5 miles out to center point, 350 knots each mile. Now, because he's doing 350 knots and we're trying to meet him at center point after he's completed his minimum radius turn, we want to be slower than he is. So we don't want to be doing 350 knots. We want to be doing closer to 200, 250 knots. So real slow. And then we also want to be about a mile behind him. So if he's calling, he's at 4 miles, we want to be at 5 miles. If he's calling, he's at 3 miles, we want to be at 4 miles because he's got an entire 360-degree turn to do, and we can't intersect him until he's completed that. That's also the reason why I have offset my heading to the right here, is to give me a little extra breathing room, a little extra time, just in case I'm getting there too quickly. And you can see I'm kind of on the edge of it. I've flown this enough to know that this sight picture is a little close, so I'm going to need to spend a little more time, basically waste a little more time before I turn in. And you'll see me do that. I'm going to turn even further to the right before turning in. Now, once he hits the 1.5 mile mark, he will make the call 1.5 miles MRT, and that means he's inside the show box. He's about to start the maneuver, and then we're listening very closely for his next call, which is ready, hit it, which means he starts the maneuver, because that's when everything goes nuts for us. We have maybe 10, 15 seconds to get from wherever we are in the sky to right above center point when he pulls nose high after he completes the maneuver. So we're coming in, watching number 5 out there. He's about to start his maneuver. Zoom in a little more, keep watching him. Ready, hit it. All right, so then he starts his maneuver. You'll hear me power on. I'm going to increase my speed a little bit because I want to be going quicker. And then I'm going to turn towards center point. And my objective is to set up a parallel course to him once he pulls out of the maneuver. Now, his course line, once he pulls out of the maneuver, he's not going to be flying directly crowd right. He will be flying canted away from crowd slightly by about 10 or 15 degrees. So when I make my turn to the right after passing over center point, I will need to keep that in mind for where I'm rolling out. Now at this point, he's underneath my nose. I can't see him. I could try and look around different parts of the cockpit. That's hard to do. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look for him to appear down here, but I'm also paying attention to when this number reaches 0. I cross center point because that's when I need to be turning. I need to make a hard right-hand turn. So here we go. Crossing center point now. Hard right-hand turn. Pause. There he is. Perfect. There he is. So he's pulling into the vertical. We're making our turn. And at this point, I am head out of the cockpit and I'm just watching number 5 because I want to match his altitude once he levels off. Now he's going to be going really, really slow. And you can see I'm doing about 400 knots. So I have plenty of speed to catch up so that by the time he levels out in his turn, which he should level out at about 1200, about 1,200 feet AGL, and I'm at about 1,200 feet AGL, and we'll look line abreast from where the crowd is. So I'm just watching him because I want to be as even with him as I can possibly make myself for the rest of this maneuver. So there he goes, there he goes, he's leveling out, so I level out at the same time. Now you can see here I'm a little low, but that's okay because of the angle of the crowd. It'll kind of make the angle work out. As long as you're at the same level as number 5 or a little lower, the picture will work out. You don't want to be too low, but lower is better. If you're high, sometimes you'll hide behind number 5 relative to the crowd, and you don't want to do that. Now, where he levels out will kind of change show to show depending on how the profile goes, but he's going to be aiming for that 1200, that 1,200 AGL number. All right, so then he'll call coming right. Whoops, got a little behind it there. So he'll call coming right, which means that we're going to begin a right turn. And again, I'm still head out of the cockpit. I'll turn 90 degrees to the right and pull hard. And then I'm just trying to stay as close to him as I can for this entire turn. And I'm anticipating the rollout on 334, which is the behind crowd heading. And then we're going to roll out and then immediately smoke on his call. So he called coming right, we're coming right, and then I'm following him around the turn. Here we go. We're almost there, so I'm anticipating the rollout, anticipating, and rolling out. There we are. And let's check our lineup here. It's pretty good. We're a little low, but not too bad. And then you can see he's already called smoke on. And if we check, our smoke is on. So we caught the smoke on call. That's good. See, there's our smoke. Cool. And then we are just going to try to maintain formation, and then the maneuver is over at this point. Now this immediately transitions into the opposing MRT. So we're going to want to tighten up our formation flying. We're going to tuck in right next to him. And you can see that we're going pretty fast. Usually the way that Chariot flies this, he ends up being about 300 knots by the time this turn is over. So we're about 50 knots faster than him. So we're going to need to slow down a little bit in order to not overspeed him. But if we're a little ahead, that actually is okay. Because if you look at where the crowd is and what they're looking at, that'll actually make it look like we're line abreast, even if I'm a little bit ahead of him. So you actually do want to be a little ahead of number 5 if you can in the turn. So there we are. Yeah, we do get a little ahead of him. But we're doing all right. We can hear the speed brake, and then here we are. We're in formation. A little power to stay in formation, and boom, we're right where we want to be for the setup for the opposing MRT. So regarding timing for the overall maneuver, what I recommend is that you find what works for you. That is what works for me, is turning in when he turns in, getting real slow, and then just kind of working the angles to get that rejoin on time. It will require a lot of practice, but if you're getting those reps in, you'll get used to the adjustments you have to make in order to get that hit on time, and you'll eventually, over time, dial it in. Demo. As usual, we're going to take a look at an example of the MRT that was flown in one of our recent Kobuleti air shows. While it's not perfect, pay special attention to the way that I'm adjusting my airspeed and my inbound angle in order to set up a good hit with Chariot after he finishes his MRT. Let's take a look.
Chariot is circling 5 miles for the MRT. And Chariot's turning in 5 miles for the MRT. Four miles, mark 353. Three miles, mark 352. Two miles, mark 350. 1.5 miles, MRT. 1 mile, mark 351. Burners now. Ready, hit it. Good entry.
Right control. Right control.
Ease in the pull. Pulling. Kicking. Cherry's pushing out. Leveling out 1600, coming right. Comes the pull. Easing a little power. Easing the pull and rolling out. Smoke on. Smoke off. Cherry's clear. 340.
Contact.
State 83.
Web state 8-5.
355. 360, easing a little power. 365.
And that's how the Legacy Blue Solos perform the MRT. If you enjoyed this video, consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel, where you can find the rest of the Legacy Blue Solos tutorial series, as well as full side-by-side show sequences and debriefs.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the flight line.